think the thing you bring up about youth really goes into sort of my next question and talking point about Reece James, because of course Reece, that absolutely incredible strike on Monday night against Brighton. I think that, you know, you think about like the Fikayo Tomori strike last season at 1 goal of the season, and you hope maybe that will be one of the strikes of the year. And, you know, if that doesn't win one, if that isn't one of the top contenders by the end of the season for goal of the season, we've had an amazing year. We really have. About Reece, because I think he falls into a similar category of, say, Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham and Hudson-ODOI, of being almost forgotten about this window because people expect, because of all the new signings, that they'll naturally be shifted to the side. I think Reece, for me, is the opposite of that. I think that the signings will only help elevate a player like Reece James' game, and I think you saw glimpses of that last season. How vital do you think Reece James is to Frank Lampard this year?
I think Reece has been one of the most vital players, because the fullbacks in the system are very important. Now, from when last season Lampard, you know, when Reece was still out with his injury before he played first team football, you know, Lampard was already kind of, you know, speaking about him in advance, kind of just hinting towards the impact he was going to have in the first team due to the qualities that Reece has. Because, you know, our academy produces, I think, you know, elite fullbacks and wingbacks for the modern game. You know, I think we have so much quality that we don't even keep. That, you know, Aina just signed for Fulham. Lamptey, you know, he's going to have a great Premier League career too. We've got other youngers still in the academy too. Livramento, next one's to blow. It feels like we know how to produce our own fullbacks that we need for our team. And with Reece, you know, he is that, you know, archetypal type of fullback you need in the game. You know, someone that is comfortable receiving the midfield, that can make those inverted runs when he needs to create the overloads out wide. He has a bonus where I think he's great one-on-one. And you know, some of the criticism you got last season, especially during the restart periods, it's slightly more difficult. But just because things look more difficult doesn't mean that Reece struggled. I mean, if you look at those games, a lot of times he came out on top of those duels anyway. And I think that was a sign I needed to see, to be like, okay, wow, this guy really is the real deal. He's not just, you know, he's not just great at a few things. He's a serious player. And, you know, when I was comparing like Reece to Lamptey, obviously Lamptey in his own right is a top young up and coming fullback. But you can kind of already see the difference in levels between him and Reece James. Like, seeing Reece, I mean, he's barely played, 50 games in the Premier League. He looks like he's a seasoned pro for God knows how many years. And just seeing how he play in the game, like, his confidence, his assurance, you know, he knows what to do at the right time. His quality is more consistent. All those types of things that you can see compared to Lamptey. I was just like, okay, I understand why he was sacrificed in a sense. But, you know, for this season in particular, especially with how we're, you know, going to be creating even more overloads down the flanks, you need to have a fullback like Reece. And this season felt like, to me, like this was going to be the final one we'd see Aspie as a first team fullback, because he did his part for us last season to great effect. You know, near the end too, he was low-key one of the best players in the end. But if you want to play this new style of football, Aspie just doesn't fully complement that. So he'd have to go back to the backup roles. So I think the fact that Reece has already been able to get a first team spot over, you know, one of the new like modern day legends in Aspie, I think it tells you everything you need to know about his quality and how Lampard trusts him and needs him in the team.
I felt, for me, the goal, of course, was just, you know, individual brilliance, and it came at a moment when the team needed it, which I think says a lot about James's character to be able to step up at that moment, because there was a sense the momentum of the game was very much shifting in one direction negatively for Chelsea. But I also felt I loved seeing Reece James centrally, as you said, going, you know, drifting inwards to central midfield, which is a position he's played in his career before. But I feel that's a very important thing for me. I think both attacking and defensively, because I think that it just, you know, can maybe add that extra man in midfield sometimes to protect against transitions. And as we saw, he's got a strike on him. And I think when he goes into, actually, of course, we know he can go and overlap as well. But I actually think when he goes into more central areas, it also creates sort of great positions for crossing opportunities as well. I remember a few times last season where he, you know, crossed from more central areas, which really created a lot of good opportunities for Chelsea. Of course, England have now got so many ridiculous right backs. It's a big question. Do you think Reece James can become England's best right back in the coming years?
I definitely think so. I think maybe when Reece earns that spot in the England first team, that will come maybe after some time. And I think that definitely, you know what, it doesn't surprise me. Lampard's, I'm sure, it's more impartial observation, but I'm sure he's looking at the national team too. You know, he's looking at the club. He knows that he has, some great young English talents that are going to be potential mainstays in that national team. And if you have both the fullbacks in a Ben and Reece being your number one for club and country, I think that boosts Reece's opportunities to be that first team right back. And I don't know, when you analyze his overall game, it's not just based on like a bias or something, because I think that right now in this country, it's been like a golden age in terms of fullback production and quality that's coming out. But I look at his other rivals, Wan-Bissaka. I think he's a great defensive fullback. Offensively, not the same. I look at Arnold's. I think, do I even really see him as like a fullback? I kind of see him as like a wide playmaker. I'm not gonna lie. I think he is so unique in terms of like how he plays that I don't know. I guess kind of like fullback-ish, but at the same time, we've seen over how many seasons that defensively at times it's like, I don't know. I get the vibe that it's just like, oh, I'm too good to get back, or I don't know. He's not as solid. You can run at him and get past him. But I think with Reece, I just think due to his physical presence, his aerial presence. I mean, he won a ton of aerial balls against Brighton too, and his ability to stick with his man. He has that anticipation, going in hard, strong, closing down the spaces instantly. That I feel like he could be the best one. And just to end this point, I kind of see him as like the English versions of like your Philip Lums and your Kimmiches. I think, you need players with that profile, tactically flexible, that know how to fill different positions too for your manager. And if hopefully England get a serious national team manager, that's what I'm hoping for, because I think the bottleneck's always going to be that, okay, we have all these sick talents, but there's no proper team because we're using, like 4-4-2 or just shit formations basically. So I do think Reece, I think he will probably become, our number one English right back in the future. I think that his overall game, he has more to his game in both parts than some of the other rivals.
It's interesting you bring up Lahm, because I've been currently reading Pep Confidential, which is a great book on Pep's first season at Bayern, and how it's infamous now. He moved Philip Lahm from right back into central midfield, and how that was such a big part of being the midfield creativity and the way Pep wants to implement his style of football at Bayern. And you speaking about versatility and fluidity, I think Reece James fits into the profile of that as well. He can, as we saw the other night, we had to take off Jorginho, bring on Dave. He can shift in at right back, and then you can just literally shift Reece James into central midfield, and it's absolutely fine. And, as we're saying with Alexander-Arnold, I think Alexander-Arnold potentially later on in his career could develop into a wide player. Like if you want to play him out wide, say in a front three, to really get his attacking elements out, but also maybe as a midfielder, that's been touted a lot, and that could help Reece James to get into the England team more. So yeah, I think even Reece being used as a midfield option. I guess maybe last season, I can't say I was disappointed, because obviously I was hoping to see Reece maybe in midfield a few more times, but I understood that, okay, we needed him at right back for the team. But, for the England national team, you have English players now that can fulfill different in-game, things when you need them to. So hopefully we can find a manager that's going to, use the best qualities of these guys and find the right system to actually get the best out of all of them. That is the aim. I mean, Southgate and England, that's another whole sort of debate. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of that's out of, control and sort of circumstance. And the hope is, I think with a lot of these players, my thing is, it's a bit like Chelsea, right? It's having that coherent vision, when you go into a tournament, and I think England have lacked that. I actually think, Gareth Southgate's got much closer to other coaches recently at England level than, say, Roy Hodgson ever did in terms of a cohesive unit. But as you say, I mean, especially with younger players like Reece James, you don't want them to go to England and there's not really a coherent plan, and they get really scrutinised, and it's it's not the players' fault. It's they're not in the right role, or they're not in the right system to really elevate their game. So I do think Reece James definitely this season will, if he keeps his form up, if he stays fit, I think he will be the main right back this year. I've no doubts.
I think so. I think he's definitely going to be our first team right back. It's quite clear. Lampard's been praising him, especially after that Bayern game, and we lost the second leg. I thought he was our standout again. That looks comfortable on their level. And I think I've been seeing all these small signs and tests that Reece has been passing. And for me, I think we've got a very special player that could potentially be a legend for the club one day.